And pelvic floor dysfunction means pelvic instability. That's what it is. So all these other presentations, like the tightness of the inside of the pelvis or the weakness of the inside of the pelvis, those are signs and symptoms of something much deeper. So I always say, why I treat the floor when the house is unstable. You treat the house first, and you're amazed at how quickly the floor becomes balanced.
I'm Riley Reese. This is the Sofia Unfiltered podcast, where we bring together thought leaders, wellness entrepreneurs, makers, and emerging health leaders. We're here to have raw, unfiltered conversations because sharing your stories has the power to change lives, help others heal, and transform the way we take care of ourselves. Here we go. Welcome back to Sofia Unfiltered. I'm Riley Reese, and today we're talking to Dr. Mamak Shakib. She is a chiropractic physician with expertise in postural neurology and neurokinesiology. She tackles joint stability and movement issues. So if you're experiencing any chronic pain and you've been searching for a solution, this episode is for you. Dr. M, welcome to the show, Dr. Mamak.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I am excited to get and let our listeners hear a little bit about your background. I'm blown away at your approaches, and just from being a female who's used some of this pelvic floor therapy, I can't wait for our listeners to hear all about you and your practice and all the things. Do you want to just start and tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Sure. So my practice is in Irvine, California. I started in Irvine, California about 30 years ago, and I'm still here as excited as ever. My background and my licensure is chiropractic, and that's such a general term because chiropractors to many may just be an adjustment. To many, you can't even differentiate between chiropractic and physical therapy or occupational therapy. It really depends on the chiropractor himself or herself. In general, I refer to myself as a rehab clinician because that's who I am. Throughout the practice, I've practiced what I was taught in college, and I realized some of my patients did great, and then there were some that did not. So in the search for the right answer, chasing the whys, because that's where the mystery resides, I ended up exploring different things. Like I wanted to know, how is it that the patterns of movement in different people varies, and why does it change? And in the search for that answer, I came across postural neurology, which made total sense. Postural neurology essentially is looking at the map of movement in the brain, because we're all born with that. We all know that this is something I knew from high school biology that's called homunculus. So there's a map of movement and map of sensory sensation, sensory and motor cortex, we refer to. And that map changes depending on the individual. So why does it change? Now we call that neuroplasticity. But we've always known that the map of movement changes based on the person's lifestyle, habits, choices, injuries, because we are to live a long time. So if that adaptation in that map does not take place, things are written in stone. So if you don't fit that, you're going to just basically end up dying. So that adaptation takes place. And a great example of that is, let's say you have a bad knee, you're going to shift your weight to the other side. And if that goes on for long enough time, that map changes. So that's similar to when the guy's arm is cut off for whatever reason and gets a sensation down the arm that does not have. That's because that map exists. That's because the neural pathway go to the arm still exists. So that history still is present. So then once we change the map, does that mean the problem is solved? That was my next question. Come to find out that that's not true. It's a much longer path. So when we have an issue, we typically go to our rehab clinician, either a PT or a rehab DC, Dr. Chiropractic, and they do whatever they do. And if it's localized to the area of pain, now we're not addressing the person holistically because that arm, that knee, that back is not residing by itself and it has to dance with the rest of the body. It's kind of like a concert. If the song does not call for a pianist, well, then it may be off because there is a need for a piano player, but the song is not calling for it. So that's where the offness comes. Now, once we bring the pianist into this symphony orchestra, does the pianist know how to play piano? Is question number one. What happened when the pianist was absent? Because everyone else, all the other musicians, had to fill in the gap. So there is that change and that adaptation that has to take place based on the new situation. So now they all need to play together for that symphony orchestra to be outstanding.
So we can get a better understanding. So if we're talking about the knee. So we're talking you may have, like the pianist is missing. So it could be you could have like a torn ligament or structure inside, torn meniscus. I mean, I don't know, something torn inside the knee. So your other knee is kind of picking up the pieces. What is that the PT or the chiropractor going to add in to help it?
That's such a good question. The first question we want to ask is, why did the meniscus tear? Because if it was someone just used the bat and hit the person in the knee, then that's justified. But if it's from use or abuse, then that means that this knee, and knee is a really interesting area because I look at the knee as a child of divorce because you hardly have a knee issue because it's typically responding to the hip and or ankles. It's stuck in between and it's trying to fix what's not happening. So if there's lack of rotation and that at the hip joint, and that's not happening because your hip rotators are not functioning properly, now the knee joint tries to initiate that rotation. That was not how you were designed to be. So every time you go against the design of the body, you become dysfunctional. So when it's a torn meniscus, it depends on the degree of it. I have my practice, I deal with chronic conditions. So there are plenty of people with torn meniscus that never have the surgery, but they're here to learn how it happened to begin with. Now, you may have an incident. Let's say you played volleyball or you played whatever, and that's an incident that led to that injury. We're not talking about incident. We're talking about how did that incident change my biomechanics. The moment the biomechanics is altered, you're designing a different body. You're having a different patterns of movement. That alteration from the original design is what becomes a problem. And when we seek care, we typically address just the area of complaint, disregarding the rest of the body and how that area is potentially even happening, the issues there as a result of dysfunction elsewhere. And once you bring that in, we have to see how functional the rest of the body is. So this mindset of addressing that pain is like one of the worst things we can do because that just means it's like you have a mold, you see a dot on the wall and there is mold and you keep wiping that mold. Well, at some point, you're going to poke through the wall and you're going to see, oh my gosh, the whole behind the wall is full of mold. So
It was such a great analogy. That is such a great analogy.
Issue with musculoskeletal pain, that's where my expertise is. So I'm not talking about everything else, though I've got my opinion on that too. The whole pain issue is misleading. Our approaches are wrong. Our attitudes are wrong. Our relationship with pain is wrong. We're doing everything wrong. And that's the reason why in my practice, I'm privileged to have been in practice for 30 years. So I've seen thousands of people, and I can comfortably tell you that my patients are getting younger, more dysfunctional than ever before because the training of providers is still as old as it was 50 years ago. And so people like me, we have to pursue the answers to those whys on our own with taking so many courses and really questioning everything that is presented to us. That's why we're having chronic issues. Chronic issues is not genetic. Chronic issues is purely musculoskeletally speaking, purely actually everything. We're not after curing. We're just after living with the condition. So as a result of that approach, I am presented with people with pelvic floor dysfunction. And pelvic floor dysfunction means pelvic instability. That's what it is. So all those other presentations, like the tightness of the inside of the pelvis or the weakness of the inside of the pelvis, those are signs and symptoms of something much deeper. So I always say, why I treat the floor when the house is unstable. You treat the house first, and you're amazed at how quickly the floor becomes balanced. We're so much better off following how nature does things because we're fully compatible with things that are naturally happening. And the moment you shift your mindset from what we're taught to what nature does, and you provide the ground for nature to do its magic, then you'll be amazed at how well the progress that you see is. And that was something that I think I became aware of it from the very beginning because I'm a chiropractor, and chiropractors are very holistic. They're very well aware of the whole body and whole nature. We used to be called, they would say, oh, the hippies of healthcare. It's like, call me whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm not changing it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can call me whatever you want, but you should call me when you want to feel better, right? This is incredible. So touching on the pelvic floor, right? I mean, as women, I mean, a lot of times, and I've only had one baby, but a lot of times we're told like, oh, that's just, it's just never going to go back to normal. You're always going to pee on your sneeze and pee. That's normal. Like after having a baby. And I just feel like that's kind of not true.
So then the question you want to ask is, how come there's some women who've given multiple births and they don't have it? And what's your reason for men who have it?
Right.
And what's your reason for young people to have it?
Right.
So that's all BS that, if you smell it, you know what?
Yeah.
And so that's not true. Is it true that certain circumstances will increase your chances? 100%. What can you do about it? Plan for it. Okay, well, I didn't plan for it. Now, what do I do? Now you need to change your agenda because if you didn't plan for it and a damage is done, first of all, just because you're peeing or because you're weak at the floor, which that cracks me up when people refer to their floor as if pelvic floor is just residing by itself. Your floor is fully connected to the inside of your pelvis. That's your pelvis wall. So for us to even break that down into floor versus wall is another ludicrous approach, in my opinion. So then when you don't plan for it and it's there, let's assess, is it really like an irreparable situation? And most often that is not the case. And then you're going to be like, okay, I need to shift my goal. My goal now is to see how I can strengthen this, not how to, I don't know, not pee, because that's one phase, that's one chapter of pelvic floor dysfunction. There are so many chapters to it. Like anyone with chronic lower back pain, anyone with chronic sacroiliac joint pain, chronic hip mobility issues, pain or not, lower extremity issues, pain or not, and poor posture has pelvic floor dysfunction. You may not be
Wow. So not even just for moms. So everybody who has any type of lower back kind of issues could be having
chronic. It's not could be, has it. I'm going to that extreme because you have to think about it. Your pelvis has 3 bones.
Right.
And listen, your body is here to serve you. And it knows very well what its function is. When you take it out of its element and you hit it with crap, then it is not going to function optimally. So if you have it, you have pelvic floor dysfunction. I did not say you have incontinence because you may not have reached that chapter yet. So I wish everyone, provider and patients, would look at those differently. It's just a matter of time. And then the sad thing about it is we consider that as a process of aging. That's far from the truth. Why am I seeing so many? An average patient age in my practice is 30s.
And you said they're getting younger. I mean, so something's going.
I have teenagers. I have
That's crazy.
young 20s in my practice, of course, because listen, at my age, well, I didn't play in the streets, but people my age would go out and play. Now you look at people in their 30s and 40s, they've been playing video games all their life. So we are taking ourselves out of our elements, and then we are wondering why our health is declining. Where there is not one single patient that comes to my practice that breathes biologically. Biological breathing is what we do by studying human babies. Babies don't breathe the way adults do, not because they're babies, because adults have jacked that up. So when that happens to be how you condition your pelvic floor and pelvic wall, every time you breathe biologically, and that is not belly breathing, because that needs to be defined, because people put terms to things and providers try to teach how to be. And in the process, the message gets lost. So belly breathing, when you push your belly out, is not biological breathing. When you have a circumferential expansion of your breathing apparatus, which is not from your chest down to your pelvis, but it's right here from the top to the bottom. When you have a circumferential expansion of that, now that is biological breathing. That is how we were designed to do. If every baby on this planet goes through the same stages of development, breathes the same way, regardless of many differences that we all have, then it's fair to say that is the manual of movement, and that's the methodology. We need to use common sense instead of just trying to complicate things. We are meant to live a long life, long, healthy life, and we're far from it. What has happened in the process is we have taken ourselves farther and farther away from the origin, from nature. When I was in my practice back in those days in my town, there was one place that would sell vitamins. I used to go there and sometimes get my lunch there because everything was organic. This is like 30 years ago. And I remember telling my patients the importance of vitamin D. I would measure their vitamin D or send them out to the lab, I should say. And there was not one single time that I would not get a call from the lab saying, "What is this 25 hydroxy?" I'd say, "That's vitamin D." They're like, "Oh, well, that's going to take 2 weeks. We're going to have to send it to a special lab." They used to say to my patients, and they meaning the medical doctors, that they would go to, "Oh, if you want to have a more expensive pee, because these things don't matter." Now, everyone thinks the solution to everything is nutrition. Well, nutrition is a huge player, but it's not the only player. Once again, we've shifted from one answer to another answer. Now the cure for everything seems to be nutrition. Your nutrition matters. So does the health of your structure, and so does your mental being. We consult our therapists for issues we have. We have no proper way of inner conversation. That is what mental health is. We're so quick at paying compliments to everyone else, and yet we put ourselves down when it's that inner dialogue that we're having. So we're once again making a mistake by focusing on one thing and disregarding the other things. So when it comes to health, chronic condition, biomechanical or not, that does not mean that's the answer to everything. But the purpose of having this dialogue right here is because regardless of who's listening and why they're listening, they need to know that there are three pillars in health: for health and for disease. When you lack those, you're diseased and then diseased. And when you address those, you're healthy and you're well. I owe that concept to my profession as a chiropractor. And that's the beautiful thing that I am very lucky to know.
Dr. Shakib, what are those three pillars you mentioned?
It's the nutrition. Your cells need to be able to have what it takes to repair itself. It's the actual structure that you are having an issue with, and do not disregard the connection. We talk about endocrinology, and then now we have functional endocrinology. The difference is with functional endocrinology, we're looking at the impact of everything else on that organ. Now, for us to address the symptoms and instead of medicine, giving supplements, I have an issue with that too. I think we can't, once again, I think that we are just so not focused, because we know that medicine is not the answer, but we're using that medical model for things with supplements. That's also wrong. For example, you may be vitamin D deficient, your C-reactive protein may be high, and you may have other symptoms, let's say digestive issues, etc. So then you go to a functional medicine doctor, many of them, not necessarily all, will give you vitamin D, and then they'll give you something for your stomach, and will give you something for inflammation. That is not functional medicine. Functional medicine means you go to the core, find the origin, and start addressing that. And you'll start seeing that many things that you had down the line was as a result of that one deficiency.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies out there. A lot of people come to Sofia Health and they're like, I just went to this other company over here, this functional medicine thing, and I ended up with $600 of supplements and I still have a problem. I mean, we're hearing that time and time again of people searching for solutions, but they're going to these companies online that are just selling them supplements. And that is,
And the supplement industry is the second most profitable.
yes, it is.
We got it. We got to understand that. We know medicine is not doing its job. Well, it's actually doing its job. It was not meant to cure. Medical doctors are, most of them, I won't say all, are technology dispensers. They're either dispensing medication or dispensing some kind of testing. If we didn't have all these tools, how would we solve that problem? That's how I propose we approach the providers. The teachings of providers need to be. We are making healthcare a lot more expensive than it needs to be. If that lower back condition, when it first came in, was addressed properly, and the approaches and the exercises that were communicated were not so localized to the lower back and maybe the hip, then you would not have that chronic condition that you would end up spending tens of thousands of dollars on technology and still have your issues. So that goes with pelvic floor dysfunction. That goes with any chronic musculoskeletal condition. Pelvic floor dysfunction is a musculoskeletal condition, even if, in my opinion, and I need to clarify this, sometimes an individual has had, let's say, and this I do see in my practice, let's say some kind of a surgery or a chemotherapy or radiation that has zapped the nerve. So now this individual is not going to be able to walk properly or carry their trunk properly. Well, that's something that individual still needs to work on functional patterns of movement, because the rest of the body still does exist. Its lack of performance can accentuate the problem that is not solvable. If you have zapped a nerve and it's gone, there's nothing I can do about it. But I can tell you that your lack of movement will spread this throughout the whole body. It's just a matter of time. Well, maybe not throughout, but you get the point.
Right.
Definitely in that vicinity of the area for sure.
Right. And so just going back to these three pillars, I know the first one was nutrition, right? And what we eat. And then what were the other two pillars that you wanted to?
The actual structure, and then it was the emotional health.
Yeah.
So nutrition, structure, emotion are the three pillars
Yeah. That's
that
awesome.
have to be addressed. That does not mean one provider provides all of that, but as a caring provider, I consider myself to be, it's my obligation to bring that to their attention and have relationships with, and collaboration with other providers whose agenda are similar. Because not everyone is created the same, not every provider with the right license is the right provider either.
Right. Absolutely.
Just need a huge cleanup in how we think about health, how we provide services related to it, and how we as individuals and the owners of this body treat ourselves. It's not about getting your nails done and getting your hair done. It's not all about meditation. It's not all about running and whatever exercise that it is we're doing. It's a lot more. So look at the big picture and try to learn more about nature. I think that is the best. It has a solution for every nature-made problem is a solution. There is compatibility. Medicine started based on what our herbs and our plants provided for us, and then they are where they are at. And the way nature takes care of balance and the tonicity of the pelvis is through movement and through biological breathing. Every time you breathe in correctly, meaning biological breathing, you relax the muscles of the floor. When it's the contraction of those muscles that happen with the breathing out process. So the tonicity and the balance of your pelvis is being reinforced at a frequency of every breath. Imagine that. That means it's the wrongest thing you have done in your life when you're not breathing correctly. And that's one of the most difficult exercises my patients have to do. It takes them forever to really grasp it, myself included. It took me a year before I could do biological breathing and drive to my office. And I live 7 miles from my office.
And that's unbelievable. As somebody who's been through this type of therapy, pelvic floor therapy after having a baby, the breathing part, I was in shock. Oh, great, I've been breathing wrong. So then, and we can't solve everybody's chronic issues, but for those listening, I feel like you have a really great way to ask questions. So for those listening, whether you have neck pain, back pain, pelvic floor, knee, whatever it is in the body, you really have a unique approach to saying, well, asking questions, right? So what can our listeners go and ask themselves, what can they be empowered with to go ask their provider? Like you mentioned with the knee, that's the dumb joint, that's the hip and the ankle, but what can we be empowered with? Are there a few key questions that you could say, you can ask the provider this, or take a minute to ask yourself this, like, is there something we can?
I can't tell you that, and I'll tell you why. Because the provider that you go to, if they don't even know what they're looking at, holistically speaking, then they're not the right provider.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, what can we empower our listeners with to make sure that they're at the right place to get the care?
Follow my YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram. I mean, sometimes people, I'm approached by people from all over the country and overseas. And I always say, I have free everything available on social media and on YouTube. Take advantage of it. What kind of questions can you ask? I think the first question to ask is, I always use nature as my guide. So the first thing that happens when we are born is breathing. And it's not because we went from liquid environment to gaseous environment. That proper breathing, that biological breathing is like having this amazing computer with amazing softwares, but with no power. You need to plug it in to access it. And that's what breathing is. It's such an intelligence, such an amazing. I mean, every time I discuss and I go over this with my patients and I practice the breathing, there are many times I cry. I know every time I get goosebumps. And every time I talk about it, imagine the number of years and number of patients I see that I share this with. I get excited just explaining to them. I think the best advice I can give people is stop relying on your providers to provide the care you need to provide you. Stop going to providers who don't answer your question and do not get obligated. To be polite, questioning is not being impolite. Questioning means you're advocating for yourself. If the provider does not answer your question or their answer does not make sense, trust your gut feeling. That was not an accident. That was nature's backup for you to use your common sense. Trust your feelings. Start asking questions. There was a time that the patient groups or general public groups were being downplayed among providers. Oh, well, what would they know if they knew that? Did they have the license? Did they go to school? To me, those are the most valuable ones because they have nothing to gain. If you're trusting someone else and they have seen results, start asking those people. Who did you see? Why do you like to see them? What is it that you gain? I mean, I always tell my patients, if I see you for the rest of your life or see you beyond what is reasonable, and reasonable is not years of treatment, then I know I suck at being a clinician. My goal is to when we providers sit down and we talk, one of the things we always complain about is how patients do not comply with treatments. To me, patients don't comply because they don't see what we see. So the question is, are you communicating what you're seeing to your patients so they see? So I started changing my style. And what that meant was I would tell my patients, I only accept you as a patient if you choose to be an apprentice looking at your issue as a project, because that's the only way you will see what I see, will prevent what I prevent, predict what I predict, and solve the way I solve. I'm here when you can't do that, but you need to do that.
For yourself, right? You need to advocate for
100%.
yourself and get better yourself.
100%. So
I mean, we're talking about breathing. We're talking about things that we do
I'm not
all
telling
day,
you
every day.
that I send humans to,
Right.
to Mars. I'm not telling you that.
Right.
I'm telling you, listen, you probably know more about your phone than you know about yourself.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. And then in this country, United States of America, I love this country, but man, we are suckers for products. They have products out there that are just crap, and yet they sell it cheap so people buy because the mindset is, well, maybe this is going to solve the problem.
Dr.
It's like,
Shakib,
no,
so you know what just happened to me this weekend is I went to the grocery store, found a powder, ashwagandha powder, and I was like, okay, let me take a look at this. I'll see if I can start supplementing this powder in some way. I got home and the back of the powder, it said, the Prop 65 California warning could cause reproductive harm, could cause all these damage. And I was like, I just took it back and I was like, unbelievable. I was like, I'm not trying to have lead problems and everything else just to have who knows what percentage of, you're actually getting it. It was so scary and terrifying what happened.
it
And
is.
I was like, the label was so small. And I was like, I hope everybody sees this. This is terrifying. We're doing crazy
It
damage to
really
your
is.
body.
When you look at in college, this is undergrad for sure. I had took a honors class, and it was about the history of advertisement. And it was so interesting how that was used to change the mindset. So I started watching old movies and I could see what they were talking about. They used the media, which was meant for entertainment, to give us subliminal messages that changed our mindset and changed the way we looked at things. They took away that independency and gave it to the hands of an agency or agents whose education was provided by companies that had ulterior motives. Unwantedly, we became the consumers of something at the sake of giving our health away. And what I'm saying is you need to get it back. We have the internet, while it has a lot of information that could be wrong, it has a lot more that are accurate. You have to take the time to educate yourself, to look into things. I'm sorry if you don't have time for it, but do not blame your age or my stupid knee is this, my stupid back is that. It's like, no, 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 that was not stupid. It was dying to show you what it was capable of. And you put it in a closet and close the door. And now you're saying, where is my knee? So it is not the age.
People just go get replacements.
So I have it. That's funny you say. I have a patient with double hip joint resurfacing. That means the ball and socket, both the ball and the socket is resurfaced. There's a piece of metal. So when he came to me and we looked at it, it's like, this thing needs a little more attention. So after his surgery, he's like, I'm coming back to you because I need to rebuild myself, not just my hips. And we can see clearly that his issue, the reason he has hip issues is because his trunk was not functioning properly. And that's because of the kind of sports that he played. So he's played with this is a gentleman in his 40s. So he's played one-sided sports. And so he has used his body accordingly. His socket did not know how to lift itself over the ball. And of course, both surfaces need to be repaired. And so that's proper conditioning of the body. Now, if I look at range of motion, which is the criteria, or pain scale, which is the criteria for some stupid insurance company to pay, then this patient would not be under care at all. Frankly, I shattered my own pelvis and I never had any pain, and my range of motion was never altered. So what does that mean? If someone told me, oh, I shattered my pelvis, I had no pain, and my range of motion was never altered, I'd be like, so you're so full of it. But I know that's to be true because it happened to me.
Is that just because all the other muscles and like your structure was just so solid?
No, I don't think so. I think I have an amazing relationship with myself, and I listen to my brain as it occurred. And I did not let anyone touch me. I did not call the ambulance when I fell off my horse. I did not call the ambulance. I carried my own leg. The only sensation I had was that my leg was going to fall off.
Oh my gosh.
Pure apprehension. It probably was going to fall off because I broke the socket to over 14 pieces.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
I broke my half of my pelvis into two, and I broke my lumbar, my first lumbar. I mean, this was not a minor fracture. I don't
I
have,
don't know how you were walking.
well, I wasn't walking. I was holding on to my leg. I was kind of twisty.
Oh my gosh.
But I went back to my office after 3 weeks, and I never had a surgery, even though the hip socket was broken into 14 pieces. The reason I'm telling you this is because when you make a connection, when you build a relationship with yourself, when you invest in understanding your own body, this is not a mystery. When we look at the relationship with pain, your pain is not your enemy. Your pain is there to serve you. But if you look at it as an enemy, the message is sour. It may not be a good message, but
So what do
the
we
messenger,
what do we tell our listeners who have this chronic pain? Like, and to shift it from the enemy to say, hey, it's just
I
trying to
think,
tell you something. And how do we get past that?
I think that the first thing is to change your mindset about pain. It is chronic pain. It's not in your head, but it does impact how you see it. We call that central sensitization, when there is a pathway of a certain reporting to the brain that keeps going up and down, the traffic is high and going that path, then in neurology we say what works together fires together. So the pain intensity is increased as a result of that. You have to understand it's not in your head, but also understand what has happened. I am a huge fan of guided visualization, a huge fan of thanking myself out loud and inward. I'm always telling myself, my God, that was such an awesome thing. You are so smart. When I do something that is, eligible for that kind of a comment, I think we are too humble about things that we should not be quiet about. You need to be that caring parent to the 4-year-old version of yourself. The good parent is not going to say, oh, honey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it. The good parent is going to problem solve with the 4-year-old to teach the 4-year-old how to problem solve. We have no relationship with ourselves. What would I give advice? Build a relationship with yourself and don't give up. I used to ask myself at the end of the day, how was your day? Which sounds funny because I was there. And the next question was, do you think you could have done better? Are you proud of how you lived your day? And I asked that probably for months before I started hearing the answer, but I wasn't going to give up. And I was shocked at the guidance that I was receiving. Things that, when I go to my dentist, I'm like, well, I think it's over here and there. And then she always tells me, I've been in practice for 35 years. I don't have any patients that can be so accurate in pinpointing. I'm like, well, I see it.
Yeah.
That's because I've invested in building a relationship with myself. If I don't build a relationship with myself, how am I going to build a relationship with anyone else?
No, that's very true. But I mean, it's almost like why people are saying meditate, but we spend so much time on social media or devices. It's easy to tune out yourself. It's easy to tune out yourself and pay attention to what's the media being put in front of you.
We get blank. Our education is off. We don't teach our children any of these. We are jacked up. Bottom line here is right this minute, every single person who's watching or listening to this needs to know, hey, your happiness, which I think is overrated because we're at this search for happiness, thinking that's going to come without sadness. Happiness without sadness does not exist.
Fairy tales.
Just like eating without pooping does not exist.
Right.
When you lack pooping, you're constipated, you're miserable. But we all love to eat.
Right.
Right?
True.
So you got to look at the balance. It's homeostasis for a reason. So build a relationship with yourself, and most importantly, become that light to other people so they can change. Make sure you teach your children how to be. Teaching is by example. It's not an accident. Nothing is an accident. Everything is planned. I was listening to someone, and there is pain with pain. There is pain with growth. There is pain with success. So it's just a matter of which pain do you choose to have. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
So we hear that all the time.
Like someone else's plan, or do you want to have your own plan? This is building a relationship with yourself is not going to cost you anything if money is an issue. Money is only an issue when the value you don't see. Yeah, you know what I mean?
I do.
So here I am, a rehab clinician. We've talked about this quite a bit. The reality is you have to work on yourself, that relationship. Start looking for the right providers. They're out there. Not too many, but they're out there. Make that connection. Maybe, we have virtual sessions. make that connection. Ask for help. Ask for help is not looking for money. Ask for help. Who would say no when you're genuine in wanting to find a direction? I think people who actually care and can provide you health will provide you the help that you need.
Yep, I agree. Right. It's incredibly said. And we empower everybody who's out there listening to find that provider who listens and gives you the help you need. And you can see how important it is to take a holistic approach to your health. I mean, I think that's been such a great takeaway. And learn how to breathe the right way, of course. Right. So we've all that we're
100%.
not breathing the right way. I need to work on that myself.
So I will send you the link to what that is. I have a video on what that looks like from the biomechanical perspective and from a directional perspective, how to practice breathing. If you have pelvic floor dysfunction, that's the magic. If you have chronic pain, that has to happen. That's like the first step in the right direction. It has to happen. And it cannot be just the area of issue. It's a holistic approach. You need to be evaluated for functionality, not pain. I mean, there's no pain with diabetes.
Right. That's the key.
There's no pain with diabetes. There's no pain with, I mean, there is once it becomes really bad. So using that as a gauge for health is the number one mistake. The worst mistake, most often it's an irreparable mistake. So, that's
the function. What function are you missing? Not where is the pain? I love it. That's such a great takeaway.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And the protocol I use is, again, studying human babies. That's what neurokinesiology is. So how do babies move? We have no weights, no gyms, no weights, no bands, no guidance. And yet we all go from helpless infants to running toddlers. How do we do it? That's the methodology. That's the manual of movement. To me, that made sense. And once I start, that was not taught in school. That is not being taught in school. But that made total sense. If the whole world was a petri dish, every single walking human being was what we scraped on the petri dish, and it produced the same result. We all became mobile. We all became highly functional, 100%. And yet, we don't use that. We don't teach that. That just doesn't make sense to me. So
where did we go wrong?
there was a time I was too young and naive to think I could change the system. Today, I know I can't change the system, but I can certainly change those people who come into my circle.
That's right.
And
We can't change the system. I mean, look what we did at Sofia Health. We are putting we're put thousands of holistic providers together. So hundreds of thousands of people don't have to spend all of their time searching, trying to figure out where to find these amazing providers who may not be, at the end of the insurance direct.
100%.
Right. So that's
100%.
what we're doing. We know we can no longer change the system, but we also need the patients, the clients, the customers to be empowered to say, I need help, and search for the person to get the right help.
And for people to realize their insurance is simply for catastrophic cases. United States of America is number one in acute care. Acute care is like heart attack.
Recurrence, right?
Yeah. But it's, I don't know what the number is now. Back when I had my radio show, it was 42 of the healthiest nations in the world. And yet we spend the most amount of money on healthcare in the world, in this country. Right. So your health insurance, which is more of a sick insurance, is for catastrophic cases. Mm-hmm. For you to trust what they will provide and they authorize, and how beautifully they state their restrictions and put the burden on the provider. Well, this is not authorized. This is not medically necessary. Who makes that determination? For us to do that, that just means you give the knife to the killer and you trust that you're going to be safe.
Dr. Shakib, thank you so much for being here and spending your time sharing your philosophies and your approach to care and the holistic ways that you are helping so many thousands and thousands of clients, unfortunately, who are getting younger, which is a little bit sad, but we just appreciate you being here so much. So can you tell our listeners where they may be able to find you and connect with you on social? We need the name of your YouTube show.
So when I was presenting the same thing to different groups of people, they were not hearing me. When I presented the same thing and chopped it under the title, then everyone's like, that makes sense. So I was saying the same thing to my pelvic floor patients. They were like, I don't know. And then I put the same information on a website I created for pelvic floor dysfunction. And they're like, oh my gosh, where have you been? So when you ask me that, I have 3 channels
Okay.
and I on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook,
Okay.
and website. So it's hypermobility therapy for my hypermobile patients. It's core pelvic floor therapy for pelvic floor dysfunction and Irvine spine for chronic condition. So hypermobilitytherapy.com, core pelvic floor therapy.com, and the other one is chiropractor-irvine.com. If you search my name under YouTube and go to the bio, you'll have all of that information. On Instagram, if you go to @Irvine Spine, you'll get the references to the other websites too. But that's all I can say. I don't make anything simple.
It's okay, Dr. Shakib. We appreciate you for really breaking it down. I mean, it's a lot to keep up with one's website, and now you're really breaking down this information for different specific groups, which is a lot of work. But thank you for sharing all this knowledge so people can be empowered to take control of their own health.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks so much for listening. This has been Sofia Unfiltered, a podcast by Sofia Health, the #1 marketplace for health and wellness. Find services, classes, and products from the top health and wellness providers. Book an appointment or join live classes now. I'm your host, Riley Reese. If this episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section of your favorite podcast provider or with a 5-star rating. Let us know what your biggest takeaway from this episode was, or share it with someone you hope to inspire. Join us again next time for more real conversations, stories, and insights that help empower you with the knowledge and inspiration needed to transform how we care for ourselves.